2021. The broad theme this morning is stakeholder engagement, a key component in project governance. My name is Kevin Dowling. I'm the facilitator for this morning's conference. I've worked on projects mainly in the technology, payroll, financial and supply chain areas. Currently work in the Department of Defence in Renmore and Galway, or should I say it's sub-office now in the box room in downtown Oranmore. So now that I've kicked off the conference in relation to my working from home base, I'd like you to get used to the chat box, and maybe you might just pop in your current locations in the chat box, whether that's Dundalk or Dublin 14 or West Kerry or whatever. So, just get used to the chat box and pop in sort of where you might be, where in the world you are, and we'll. So we have Swords and Oranmore coming in straight away, which is good, and we'll see a few more popping in as we progress. So I must first of all kind of pay tribute to a hard-working committee who assist in establishing the themes, arranging the speakers, and doing all the behind-the-scenes technologies and organising physical venues whenever that's possible again. Good to see such high numbers attending this morning's conferences. Don't know how I can fit the 200 or 300 people into this little box room, but we'll figure that out. As John said, the cameras and mics are muted today with the exception of the panelists, but we do encourage the use of the questions and answers box that's available through the Cisco WebEx tool. We'll be running a couple of polls this morning as well, just to get throughout our session, just to get some feedback. Our panelists this morning consists of a number of key speakers, and we'll introduce them in a second. The Assistant Chief of Staff, Brigadier General Adrian O'Murrochú, and the Assistant Secretary General from the Department of Defence, Des Dowling, will also be joining in as sort of the key panelists that will help in terms of formulating some of the questions and the answer sessions. So on that note, I'm going to hand you over now to Brigadier General Adrian O'Murrochú, who's going to introduce the conference. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kevin, and good morning, everyone. My name is Adrian O'Murrochú, and as Kevin said, I'm the Assistant Chief of Staff in the Defence Forces. And you'll hear later from my colleague and co-sponsor, Des Dowling, who's the Assistant Secretary General in the Department of Defence. So on both our behalves, for me and from Des, can I welcome you to our first virtual conference for 2021. So for some years now, as you know, OPS 2020 has provided our overall strategy for development and innovation in the public service. And we're already looking, as you know, centrally now at a new programme, let's call it OPS 2030 or something similar, which will guide us in the longer term. And within OPS 2020 then, the Defence Organisation, that's the Department of Defence and the Defence Forces, have the lead on Action 10, which is to embed programme and project management across the public service. And to this end, we have an Action 10 subgroup which facilitates the running of these conferences, with, of course, help from our colleagues in DEPR. Now, previously, for those of you who've been around at this for a while, you remember we used to meet in Dublin Castle. It seems like a long time ago now. And in 2020, for obvious reasons, our 4 conferences took place virtually. And this is our first virtual conference for 2021. I'm delighted to have 3 excellent presentations today, which will provide insights in project management across 3 distinct public service bodies. And to open, we'll hear from John Muldowney about project governance structures in the Department of Social Protection and how he sees the potential evolution in project and programme management. And I'll come back to John presently. After John, we have Eamon Kelleher from the Revenue Commissioners, who will outline his experiences of artificial intelligence projects within Revenue and how agile project management concepts may be managed. And Eamon is a principal officer in ICT division in the Revenue Commissioners with responsibility for maintenance, enhancements and life support to our taxation and revenue online services. And of course, you'll be aware the excellent reputation, the online services, they've literally won awards for Revenue's online services. He's worked in Revenue for the past 6 years, previously working as an IT consultant for Accenture. So welcome in. And following Eamon then, Ita Whelan from Ordnance Survey Ireland, or OSI, will tell a story about her Scrum journey and will outline what lies ahead in OSI's journey. And Ita joined OSI GIS projects. For the past 6 years, she's been doing various Scrum roles and gathering a full appreciation of what it offers. Previous to that, she held roles in project management and business analysis in the pensions technology industry. And of course, the quality of OSI's outputs I can vouch for personally, because I've used maps all over the world, in the Middle East and Africa and in Europe. And I have to tell you, if you're lost up a mountain anywhere in the world, you hope it's in Ireland, because the quality of the OSI products will get you home, and luckily the people behind you looking to be brought home. So thanks for that, Ita. You've saved my skin on more than one occasion. And so if I could come back then to our first presenter today, John Muldowney. John is a principal in the IS division of the Department of Social Protection with more than 30 years experience in IT. And for the past 20 years, he's been extensively involved in a major program of service delivery modernization, with responsibility for delivering large-scale software developments to support the modernization of the department's business processes. And, you know, social protection have had a great year. And in fact, it's remarkable what they have achieved through the pandemic and the enormous transformation that's been done and the delivery that's been done in respect of pandemic payments and all the other things that had to be done at very short notice. And in fact, I don't think that full story has been told yet. It'll be one of the great successes of the public service during COVID. So more recently, John has taken on responsibility for the project office within the department. And so, John, you're very welcome also, and the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for having me. Thank you for the introduction, Adrian. I appreciate that. So I'll just take over the screen there.
I made it present, John.
We're good there, yeah?
Yeah, we can see the slides now.
Okay, look. So as I said, good morning, and I'm delighted to be here and to have an opportunity to speak to everybody. So basically what I'm going to do is to give an overview of the project governance structures within the Department of Social Protection. We don't have the traditional project management office set up. We've more kind of a bespoke setup that's kind of organically grown over the years within the department. And the current structure has evolved over the last 13 to 15 years. So I'll just go through it with you, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions if you have any at the end of the presentation. So within the Department of Social Protection, governance for us is basically the effective and efficient use of resources, enabling our organisation to achieve its goals. So the project governance process itself is a process which all projects and proposals and initiatives are prioritised and budgets and resources are assigned. The main benefits then of having a good project governance structure is to give us greater transparency and consistency in the evaluation of projects and proposals, and then it facilitates the effective prioritisation within our capacity within the department. So as I say, it gives us more effective management of resources, and that includes the finances, people represented by the business area, and of course our ICT people, and then our infrastructural resources as well. And time would be a fairly essential resource when a lot of our projects are very much time focused and driven by that. Again, our project governance structure allows us to ensure projects contribute to and align with our departmental goals, our objectives, and our strategies. So that leads us then to have a more effective management of our consultancy budgets. So basically, it's a structure that facilitates the efficient running of projects within a structure that gives full transparency and allows us to achieve our goals. So within the department, our whole project governance is overseen by a project governance committee. Now, the project governance committee is a sub-board of the management board itself, and it's chaired by the Secretary General of the department. The role of the PGC is to prioritise and approve projects and assign project resources and agree the assignation of those resources subject to the availability. They perform monthly reviews of the current status of projects within the project's portfolio, and they maintain oversight of our procurement gateway process, and I'll outline just what that is in a minute. So the fundamentals of a project within the department, well, it's a block of work over and beyond our daily business. Our daily business being mainly and predominantly the administration of social welfare schemes. The project would be something beyond that and something that wouldn't normally take place. So, for example, if a new scheme was introduced, we could have a project to develop a computer system to administer the scheme, but the administration of the scheme itself would be a business process. Every project would have dedicated resources, and the business takes ownership of every project. So for every project that's suggested as a candidate for a portfolio, it would be aligned with a business owner who would take full responsibility and ownership of that. Every project has to have a business case which outlines the objectives, the costs, timelines, and the benefits. And at the end of every project, then we'd have a lessons learned and a benefits realization stage as well. So basically, that's kind of in a nutshell the core of what our projects are about. So as I mentioned earlier, we have this project gateway process, and every project, I guess, comes up with, as a concept initially. And within the department, it would effectively be split up into programs. And each program would be owned by an assistant secretary, and each program would have multiple projects within it. So when a project is assigned or is identified, it would fit within one of the programs, and a business case would be developed, which would be submitted through. The business case then goes to the project governance committee for approval. And invariably every year in October, we have what we call the project annual conference every October, where every candidate project for the following year that is identifiable goes through the concept business case and is brought then in a project portfolio to the PGC, where it's considered then in terms of priority, business validity, and desirability in terms of moving it forward for the following year. So the PGC generally appoints a subcommittee who review the complete projects portfolio, and it's not an insignificant amount of work, as you can see from that. There's at least 100 projects that are suggested as candidates every year, and these are reviewed by the PGC subcommittee. The review would take place in terms of what the priorities are from a strategy perspective, from a business plan perspective, from a government perspective, European directives, and a number of other instances, legislation as well. So the subcommittee then will come back to the main PGC to outline the priority list for the following year, and then subject to ratification by the PGC, then the projects will become part of the portfolio for the following year. At that stage, then they have to develop a project initiation document, and then the project is launched by reaffirming the project initiation document and agreeing on the actual scope of the project. These will be predominantly IT projects, but some larger financial projects would come in through this gateway process as well. Where the IT projects, in many instances, a request for tender would have to be developed as part of the process, and then that again would go to the PGC at their regular meeting, and on the agenda then it would be considered for approval. Once it's approved by the PGC, it would then be aligned with the deeper for approval on their side. And then the whole process of the issue, evaluation and appointment would go on that basis. So once that whole process is complete, the project is launched, and the whole reporting structure is initiated. So a project board would be assigned who would report to the program board. So there'd be many projects going to a single program board, and then the program board would report then to the PGC on an ongoing basis. And then at the end of the project, as I said earlier, we'd have the benefits realised and lessons learned exercises. This facilitates improving our process going forward by applying the lessons that we've learned and validating the effectiveness of the project by the benefits that have been realised, which would have initially been anticipated at the launch of the project. So there's various sets of documentation then that would be required in order to support the governance process. As I said earlier on, we started with a business case which outlines the rationale for undertaking the project, the purpose and the objectives that it hopes to achieve, and then the prospective benefits from initiating and completing the project. The project initiation document itself then captures and records the basic information needed to plan and define the scope of the project. It identifies what the project is aiming to achieve, how it will be managed and controlled, and who will deliver the project in terms of who are the people assigned for each of the roles and responsibilities. The document then examines any assumptions and dependencies, and these are noted then. Then as part of the project document set, we'd have a stakeholder communication plan. And this is to ensure that the right message is conveyed to the right people at the right time through the right medium. Within our department, a lot of our stakeholders could be external. So again, we would have to fit the communication plan to suit the internal and external stakeholders and ensure that the right message is given out at all times. A quality plan then would be developed, ensuring that the business and IT needs have been met and the deliverables are monitored to ensure compliance with quality standards. A risk management plan is drawn up, identifying all of the risks, identifying mitigation where necessary, response where needed, and then a mechanism to track and follow the risks to ensure that they don't materialize. And finally then a complete project plan, which is the roadmap for the project, is outlined with all of the key deliverables identified and the target dates, etc. So the actual governance itself, this is a kind of a busy looking diagram, but it outlines effectively the overall structure of the governance within the department. So at the very top there with the Secretary General and the department's management board. Beneath them is the subcommittee, which is chaired by the Secretary General and is the Project Governance Committee. And this group has overall responsibility for sign-off and acceptance of every project which is initiated and implemented within the department. On the left-hand side there, you'll see that we have the Project Office, which is responsible for overseeing projects to ensure compliance with standards and to provide templates for documentation and support where needed in terms of completion and compliance with the governance standards. So on the right-hand side, just there's the IS Division Management Board, which would come in on the technical side and would oversee the project management team, which every project management team would be led by an ISD principal officer, and each project itself will be managed by an assistant principal project manager. The project management team would report to a project board, which is chaired by a principal, and the project board itself then would report to a program board, which is chaired by an assistant secretary. The project boards would meet as frequently as required, anywhere from 2 to 4 weekly. The program boards generally meet monthly, but on occasions could meet a lot more frequently. And in last year, a specific program board was set up to oversee the project to implement a system to pay the pandemic unemployment payment. And that board met weekly for almost 8 months, because the pace of change and the decision-making required to support the ongoing processing of the PUP applications was so dynamic that it had to meet that regularly. So there's a information technology steering group which oversees all of the projects to ensure that they comply with the structures within the department. The layer below here is the risk and quality management layer, and we'd have the business user groups, our own internal audit within the department, the ICT category council, which we liaise with OGP deeper, and then within the department a number of units would also support it, which would be the business planning risk management unit, the business continuity unit, and the business information security unit. So again, there's a lot of areas who would support projects in terms of compliance with the various standards that are I'm saying forced on us, but all the standards that we have to comply with across the government and the civil service. Then down below, we have a number of groups who would also be, there's a technical architecture group within the IS division who look at the overall architecture and determine the appropriate architecture for the project. And below that, there's a number of other ISD groups in terms of service delivery, the infrastructural group, software engineering, and our enterprise architecture. So it's a complicated setup, but the structures are there, and basically each group has a specific involvement in the progression of a project, and the roles are clear, and they contribute so far anyway to the successful completion of the vast majority of our projects. So the structure of the program itself then is, if we work from the bottom up, every project has a project manager, and each project has a project owner. The project owner is a business representative, and each project then has its own project board. The project boards then report to the program board, which is managed by a program manager, and program sponsor then would be the assistant secretary program sponsor. They're supported by the project office and ultimately report to our PGC. So that's really in a nutshell, the structure that we operate within our governance setup. So the decision span then within each of the areas. So at the project management level, we've got the project board who look after the governance of the project. The project owner chairs the project board, and their span of influence is specifically related to items that were within the domain of the project itself. Then at the next level, with the program management, which is the program board, and that's managed by an assistant sec, and they basically have a span of influence over multiple projects within the program, and these projects could span across the organization. So the span of control widens as it goes up the levels. And at the finest level, then with the project portfolio management level, which the governance is managed through a management board, PGC. So it's the subcommittee of our management board. It's chaired by our Secretary General and has span of influence over all programs. So effectively every project through a program comes within the domain of the PGC, and they have the complete span of influence there in that regard. So just to summarize then the reporting that takes place. So the PGC view all programs and all projects. And again, that's just in terms of the overall portfolio management within the department. So the PGC will meet as required, but generally, as a rule, would meet 6 weekly. And the PGC is attended by the largely the management group of the department, but it's also supported by the project office, who look after the minute taking, agenda setting, and so on. Again, there's notifications that come out of PGC to the various stakeholders within the department that's managed as well by the project office. So it's high level of detail which comes to PGC, and the main process there is exception reporting. At the program board level, they have their purpose is the regular reporting on the overall status and plan of issues, risks, etc., in relation to each project within the program board span of influence. And again, they're responsible for maintaining the program review, reviewing the program usually on a monthly basis or bi-monthly if that frequency isn't desired. The program board is attended by the program sponsor and the project owners, and various project representatives could be called to present to the program board on occasion, depending on what is on the agenda. The level of detail is at a summary level of all projects, and it covers the progress in relation to each project, issues that have arisen, risk monitoring, and general preparation for the PGC. At the project board level, it engages with regular reporting on overall status versus the plan, identification of issues and risks, etc., within that particular project. It meets monthly or more frequently if required, and the attendees there would be the project owner, project manager, vendor if appropriate on the project, and the business representatives would also be engaged at that level. And again, the project board would be at a very detailed level in the context of the project itself, and would very closely monitor the project plan in the context of the deliverables and the key milestones. So within the governance structure, there's a number of financial subheads that they would have responsibility for, and the predominant one, like in terms of IT projects, would be the IT A252, which is the external service provision, and that would be largely large-scale IT projects. And then the other subheads, which would be a lesser extent, would be the consultancy services at the A271, and then A272, other consultancy services, and then A29, which would be e-government subhead. Just on the A252, the department works roughly on a budget of around 50 million per year, and then over the other three subheads, you'd be talking about another 20 million. So overall, about 70 million would be within the control of the PGC on an annual basis. Just out of interest, the annual project conference would, where people bid for conferences for the following year, the number of projects that are bid would generally oversubscribe the capacity in terms of the financial resources that would be available for that year. So in reality, you may get 80 million of projects suggested as candidates for the following year, but within the context of the 50 million budget, the prioritization determines what actually can get through and what can't. So that was it. So just then, in terms of the project office itself, which I have responsibility for, one of the main roles of the office is support for the project governance committee, and provide support for the project sponsors and the project managers. So we work continuously on developing the department's procurement policy, and within that, like, we will work with DEPR and other agencies to determine that we are compliant with and aware of changes as they arise, and ensure that our templates are compliant with the standards across government organisations, and EU, and that we are not at risk in falling foul of the procedures. We devise and maintain procurement and project management templates, and we do a quality assurance of the procurement process itself. So any project team who's engaging in an RFT process or submitting documents for PGC, we will work with the team to ensure that they are compliant and consistent with the templates. We coordinate, monitor and report on consultancy on the various subheads that I outlined there earlier. And basically we do financial reporting, we do estimates on expenditure, we determine the actuals as the invoices are processed, and then we report to the administrative budget unit, which is part of the accounts branch within the department, on expenditure against profiles. I outlined the subheads that we work to mainly there already, and then the last thing is that we coordinate briefing material for the CNHE, for the Public Accounts Committee, and we coordinate responses for PQs in relation to expenditure and projects within the department, and we look after general correspondence as it arises as well. So it's a formal role in terms of support for the governance structures and ensures that we meet and are consistent with all of our standards. That's pretty much a whistle-stop tour. I have a fairly short time. I don't know how I'm doing on time there, guys, but I'll leave it open for questions.
Great, John. Listen, thank you very much for that. That's a very interesting tour, as you say, of the governance structures in DSP and the linkages between your own sort of project office and the governance committee. So just in terms of the formalities, we're going to kick off a poll now in the background, where we're trying to address things like the sort of project managers keeping track of interdependent projects, and I suppose it's something that you know, John has kind of alluded to in his presentation in terms of that sort of mix of various competing projects. So I'm going to kind of open it to the panel now in terms of whether any of the panelists might have a question or two for John. Otherwise, we have an on-the-fly Q&A session going that you're welcome to post questions to, and we'll try and address them on the fly, or maybe come back to it at the tail end of our conference. So feel free to pose questions in relation to John's enlightening piece there. Otherwise, I'm just going to maybe just open it to the internal sort of panelists there in terms of maybe they have a question or two to pose to John. So if there's anybody there on the panel that would like to pose a particular question.
Kevin, Des here, if I could.
Yeah, thank you, Des.
Yeah, John, thanks very much. It really was a great run. The governance arrangement, something which, as colleagues will know, it's an active area of interest for this network, but for the action team under Action 10. I was curious maybe if you could maybe just explain a little bit more fully, perhaps, the governance in terms of the program level and the portfolio level, and let's say then the overall goals of the organization, whether that be in the strategy statement or whether it be in kind of priorities list. And if you like, what was the process to dovetail the actual projects or programs with those overall goals? And was that in the hands of the management board, or to what extent was there ministerial involvement in any of that? Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Des. Yeah, basically, the subcommittee of the PGC, which reviews the projects after the annual project conference, their main goal would be to ensure that the projects that are prioritized are in line with the strategy statement of the department and also the business plan. In addition to that, so most of the ministerial directions, legislative requirements, EU requirements would have filtered through the business programs, and would have been selected as candidate projects through that process. So basically, each program manager has a responsibility to ensure that their work agenda for the following year has taken account of every aspect of the department's requirements in terms of delivery on those documents. So the PGC subcommittee, again, at that level, then would prioritise them on the basis of their understanding of the department's overarching priorities. Am I answering your question, Des?
Yes, certainly, that does answer. Thanks, John.
I just see there was a question there just in relation to our documents reviewed by a legal person, and rather than type out an answer, Tim, I just say that the vast majority of our tender documents would be standardized and have originally been reviewed by our legal department. But there are occasions where issues do arise, usually post-process, where a vendor or potential vendor would question some aspect of the document, and we may need to seek additional legal advice at that stage. But largely, we work within frameworks, and so the legal aspects of the framework would already have been defined. So it's only when we come to something new that we would have our legal department maybe just review the documentation on that basis.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Tim, for the question. That's good stuff. I'm going to move on, guys, just in the interest of time and in the interest of kind of progression. We're going to move on now to our second speaker for the day. So I'm going to introduce you to Eamon, and the Brigadier General Omoroku would have given some history of Eamon's bio earlier on. So Eamon is going to talk about the chatbot project in Revenue Commissioners. So over to you, Eamon, please.
Eamon, you're on mute.
Apologies. Can you hear me now?
Thanks,
Yep.
Thanks, Eamon. Yeah,
Thanks
that's
very
good
much.
stuff.
Thank you for that. So just before I jump into this presentation on the AI chatbot project, I just wanted to tie in a little bit with John's presentation and his setup that he outlined in the DSP. So just from a revenue context, we have quite a similar structure in place. We have a project management structure in place. We have our PMO office. We have our project boards. We have our steering meetings. We have our approval levels, our IT executive where the changes go through. So in the normal standard working environment, that's the mechanism that we use to deliver the vast majority of the projects that we undertake in any given year. What I'm going to go through is a slight aside, I suppose. This was us kind of dipping our toe in the water of AI that we carried out roughly around 3 years ago, not far off 3 years ago to the month, looking at kind of some reasonably cutting edge technologies at the time to see how we could explore them, what advantages we could get in undertaking a pilot project in this regard, I suppose. And on the back of that, we subsequently looked at the particular changes we needed to bring about to the governance, to the approval, to all of our processes when taking into account AI and some of the technologies on the virtual agents that we're looking at, on the RPA type processes and so on. So just to give a bit of context, what I'm going through here isn't the standard processes that we go through in any given day in revenue. It's a slight aside from it, but I hope it'll be relevant and interesting to go through it. So effectively what we had was we kicked off a pilot pilot project relating to tax clearance. So not to get into too much detail on the tax side, but tax clearance effectively is confirmation from us in revenue that an applicant's tax affairs are in order. And it's required when issuing licenses and grants and any contracts with the public sector. So it's quite an important fundamental piece in place required by individuals and businesses. So there's a call center that deals with approximately 55,000 calls a year, so quite small in relative terms to the volumes of calls that our help desk deal with across the breadth of tax queries, but relevant to roll out a pilot project here, I suppose. The scope of the project was to apply design thinking to collaboratively define personas and conversation scripts and user experience, using AI to implement conversation flows, to select and to configure and train cognitive services, cloud services in these cases, to deal with text-to-speech, speech-to-text, and natural language processing. So it was all quite new to us, and therefore there was a degree of kind of understanding, configuring, and training that needed to take place initially. The solution that we were offering would only be offered over the phone through telephony systems. So there was an integration layer required with our existing systems, and the capability of the AI system in place was to provide persistence to the conversation, delegation to live agents. So this sat on top of an existing help desk. So it was very important that we had the ability to transfer if required, and analytics to look at the quality and I suppose the benefits of the calls themselves. So we launched it in July 2018. It was about 6 or 7 agile sprints, 2-week sprints. So a very, very quick project. Well, very, very quick at the time anyway. I think the last 12 months have shown us through our need to adapt to COVID and the pandemic that everything is just a little bit quicker these days and has to be turned around to be available to the public quite quick. But even in that respect, a 14-week project was I suppose a lot quicker than our typical delivery cycle. The project itself, it was AI powered chatbot, as I said, integration with core systems. So it adapted as well a flow that went down a kind of smart suggestions route, which I'll go through a little bit later, and had the option to apply over the phone, which was quite important as well. So just looking a little bit at the stakeholders that were involved in it, we had a very, very small project management team in place. We effectively delivered the project over 5 locations. So there was a couple of big challenges with the project. One of them was the physical location of those who were impacted and had a stakeholder interest in the project itself. 2 offices in Dublin, 1 in Limerick, and we had people working in London and in Latvia as well. So tying that all together in a very short time frame was quite critical. We had our key sponsor in the PMO office and our separate testing team working in one of the Dublin offices. Our architecture and telephony integration team working in a separate Dublin office. The sponsor of the system from a business perspective, the owner of the system and the call center itself worked down in Limerick, and we had the core part of the development team, the user experience and conversation designers, working in London with the Scrum Master and the rest of the team working out in Latvia. So it was as much a challenge to get everybody together and making sure that the communication was effective as much as anything else really within this project. We also had a UAT testers. The users in these cases would have been taxpayers, I suppose, so who rang up and required support and help for tax clearance. So we adopted a user approach of using people across multiple locations in order to assist in that area of it. As well as being across multiple locations, we had also a mixture of revenue and Accenture resources working on the project across the multiple locations. So within revenue itself, we have a multi-sourcing vendor approach where revenue and contractors work side by side across the delivery of our IT infrastructure and systems. And that was mirrored as well as part of this rollout, where we had revenue people and Accenture people again working across multiple locations, just to add to the complexity required, I suppose. The delivery approach itself, as I said, it was a collaborative exercise, bringing a very much an agile delivery approach over sprints. So the typical agile type processes around discovering and describing, to ideate and prototype in very quick successions, getting quick iterations and getting those communicated and sent out and approved and modified by the different stakeholders, continuous testing across it and implementation as well. A very high level view across some of the milestones. I appreciate that the text is probably quite small for anybody to try to read, but just to give a sense of, we have our 6 sprints across the top of it over the course of 14 weeks up until go live. And the project itself was then broken down into the planning, the mobilization, the design phases, the architecture and infrastructure, building the virtual agent and integrating the AI services, full systems integration as well, the IVR and CTI integration as well in the middle, and then testing and training throughout. So I've highlighted, and I'll talk through them, some of the key deliverables at the end of each sprint relating to the stakeholder engagement and the challenges that they brought about. So the mobilization of the team, I suppose, needed to be in place even before the first sprint started. So a sprint 0 effectively, as a kind of a pre-project phase, was critical, and the challenges that entailed across the 5 physical locations where we were working from. Very quickly in the cycle, we had our first UX and design drafts that were issued. And again, required an awful lot of face-to-face meetings at the time between the IT owners and the business owners of the systems, to get a feel for what exactly the technology could offer and how it could best be utilized, because it was new, not just to the business areas but to the IT areas as well. Creating dialogue bills as well, and having business design workshops, which were really interesting. So a standard phase of any agile deliverable would be having design workshops, but again talking through some of the limitations that voice offer, as opposed to on-screen text or kind of website type delivery of content. Was a very interesting challenge that we had to overcome. So multiple iterations of the business design workshop, different versionings of the dialogue bills as we go through the maturity and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And again, by the end of the 3rd sprint, halfway through the project, we were already into UAT type testing. So UAT round 1, which continued in kind of a sprint by sprint. You finish the first round of UAT into the 2nd round, into the 3rd round, and so on, and assess and kind of getting very, very quick feedback loops to tie back into the design approach, and see what worked, what didn't work. So effectively, it was an ambitious 6-week sprint with, as I said, a couple of weeks in advance in kind of pre-project sprint 0 phase across each of these. This was our first view, as I said, to how we would roll out this sort of technology in this sort of a time frame. On the complexities involved in the use case itself, we had to analyze a significant volume of phone calls that had come in through the help desk. What are people ringing about? Why do people feel the need to contact revenue through this means? And then we had to design the capabilities of our VDA, our virtual digital agent, in order to meet those. So people looking to apply, people looking for their numbers, people receiving contacts and inquiring around that. One of the decisions we made early on when going through this sort of an approach was to use smart suggestions. So to try and direct the conversation down particular avenues where we understood, based on the previous correspondences and the previous interactions that the customer would have had with revenue. So when we analysed some of the phone calls, as you can imagine, maybe it's specific to Ireland, but people pick up the phone and you could have a 30-second, 1-minute conversation initially around the weather, or I'm just back from holidays and I found a letter in the post and I'm a little bit worried, and my dog brought it in and it's chewed a bit and I'm not quite sure what this word here says. And actually analysing some of the phone calls, it made an awful lot of sense to upfront and early on in the conversation flow to provide assurances, I suppose, that we knew who the person was based on the information they provided with us initially, that we had a good idea as to why they were calling, and that's, I suppose, set them at ease, and it gave confidence to the rest of the flow of the conversation. So if you haven't previously interacted with revenue from a tax clearance perspective, the majority of those calls were around looking to apply. If you had already received and had been issued, then you're probably looking for your number. If we had sent a letter out to you to tell you you had your tax clearance had expired, you're probably looking for a little bit of information as to why it has expired or what your next steps and so are. So it's something particularly on the voice side where it is quite interesting, where you're limited in kind of the number of options that you want to give them to select. This isn't a kind of a radio button or a checkbox to say why are you calling, or select the most appropriate one. You needed to get up front and offer the different options, I suppose, based on the previous understanding and history of the call. So that worked very well for us from a design perspective. I'm not going to go through the call breakdown and some of the flows, but on the left hand side effectively is where the robot itself talks, and on the right hand side is where the user themselves talk. So it was heavily weighted for us to provide content and provide context, and then for the user to agree or to clarify or to change as required. So just an interesting design flow when looking at voice that we understood, quite different to the stuff through our online services, through website offerings. I'm going to give you a quick 1 minute just sense of a call, I suppose, and the kind of flow that goes through. I hope this works. It's not a very technical approach, but I'm using my phone up to my speaker, and I think this should work. So if you can just listen, I suppose, to the next minute. This is, I suppose, a real call that would have come in, well, through one of our test systems, but this is the lag, or the conversation is very similar to what's in place at the moment.
Your best. I'll need to look up your file. First of all, tell me what you earned for PP quoted at the start of the call. Okay, there's one more thing I need to check. What's your date of birth? 21st of 1962. Okay, just to check. I heard the 21st of August 1962. Is that right? Great. I'm looking up your file now. I've looked up your case and I can see you do not currently have tax clearance. Are you looking for help to apply? Yes, please. You can apply for tax clearance using Revenue's Rosal My Account services at revenue.ie. Prefer, you can apply over the phone. Do you want to apply for tax clearance over the phone? Yes, please. Okay. Your application for tax clearance will be made on the basis of your current revenue record, including details of any properties you own and parties you are connected to. Are you happy to proceed on that basis? Okay. why you're applying for tax clearance?
I'm applying for mortgage and my bank will ask me to prove tax clearance.
Thanks. Please wait a moment while I submit your application. Your application has been successful and I have a tax clearance access number for you. You can give this number along with your PMN or tax registration number to anyone who needs to verify that you are tax cleared. Please note that in order to retain your tax clearance, you will need to continue.
So that's just kind of an example, I suppose, of a phone call that comes in, and that's the real time, I suppose, turnaround for responses. Again, the conversation is quite natural. It's intended to be quite natural. And the smart suggestions, kind of the robot itself, driving the conversation and understanding the context of why somebody's ringing in the first place. I'm not going to go through the solution architecture. It's a little bit more techy anyway, but basically there are, I suppose, a number of systems involved. There are our own internal ones within the premise. There are calls made out to the cloud, to Google, to IBM, and to Amazon, just to go through the flow in order to do speech to text and so on. Number of hops, so it was quite a complex system from an integration point of view as well, but rewarding, I suppose, as well. Then there's also some of the tools we use, IBM Watson, and for monitoring and so on, that to get a good sense as to what worked and what didn't work, I suppose. There's some observations as well just on the project around using cloud and data privacy and authentication, I suppose, as well. And challenges that voice itself offers that shouldn't be underestimated, and training, I suppose, of the agents that's in place. So appreciate from your time point of view, I think I'll probably wrap it up, but look, I hope that gave a bit of an overview, I suppose, of a particular niche project that we would have had some of the challenges involved in keeping the stakeholders all together, I suppose, over a 6-sprint deliverable. The project itself was nominated for an award in the UK, the CogX Award, in 2019, and it won that prize overall. So there's good recognition of use of AI in government. So I'll leave it at that. Appreciate it. I'm probably run on slightly over my time at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's great, Eamon. Listen, thanks very much, and congratulations on that award. It's nice to get a bit of recognition for the hard work. What I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to pose or to pause the kind of questioning for the time being, and we're going to open the second poll. But I know there's a couple of questions coming in on the actual box itself. Thank you, Juan, and thank you, Helen. What we'll try and do is we might invite John, we might invite Eamon to answer on the fly if he can, and if he can't, we'll come back to them again at the end of the conference. So the second poll is kind of linked to, I suppose, what we started off this morning's conference on in terms of the of remote access. So, you know, given the people coming in from Cork and Kilkenny and Westmeath and Kildare and Offaly this morning, I guess there's something to be gained from answering this poll, which is in relation to future kind of delivery methods for our our project managers network conferences. So there's a couple of there's three particular options there. Eamon, if it's okay with you, and if you can stay on till the end of the conference, just in case there's any kind of questions that we might be able to kind of hoover up at the end. If that was okay. There's a couple there in the actual box itself, Eamon, that you might just have a look at. I suppose they're direct questions in relation to team memberships and stuff like that. If you could address them on the fly, that would be great. Otherwise, we might come back to a couple of those questions. So I'm going to move on. So we're going to move on now to our third and final speaker this morning, or this afternoon now. Just hitting the noon. So we're going to move and listen to Ita, who is going to talk to us about her sort of experiences and her Scrum journey. So Ita, I'm going to pass it over to you. And thanks again.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not muted. I'm going to share. I must say that those two conversations this morning, very interesting, John and Eamon. Particularly just want to say in relation to John's that we are in the process of developing PMO office, and it's interesting to see how they've gone about it. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Okay, grand.
All good.
Thanks. Thanks everybody for coming along. So Scrum, which is a flavor of Agile, this is what I'm going to talk about this morning. I haven't got a whole lot about stakeholder engagement, but there is a little bit further on in this. I've been doing Scrum for about 6 years, and hopefully what I have today is of interest. I just want to say that I'm not a project manager myself, so I'm just managing expectations there in case people have any hard questions at the end. I do actually want people to ask questions, because one of the reasons I came in was to get a feel for how people were using Agile within the public service, and that was one reason why I joined this network. So I'll just go on into next slide if I can. Just bear with me a minute. Okay. So I have kind of a selfish take on Scrum and why I think it's worth using. It was recommended as a good fit for a project that we were about to begin, and having been through it at this stage a number of times, it feels pretty good on the inside. It gives us autonomy, mastery, and purpose when you're working inside the Scrum, that you can. It's actually it's quite a comfortable way to work. The Scrum team have a sense of really caring about the project and how it's going to go. So it's a complete move away from Taylorism, and there's no carrots and sticks needed for it. The Scrum guide is short and it's easy to follow, and I've just put in the reference there. It allows makers' time as distinct from managers' time, so you actually have a sufficient block of time in which to do something, that you're not just getting into it when your time is up and you have to move on to the next thing. That's actually really quite important, especially Eamon will know this from sort of if you're using any kind of design thinking, which we would have been. It provides social support within the Scrum and also the need for headspace. And it ticks this box, which is a clip I took from the Making Innovation Real, which is the sort of Action 6 there on the OPS 2020. And it's actually the second priority item, so it's quite high up on the list. So this is really about doing Scrum properly, because it can support that culture that is desirable. It also means that looking out for the goose, looking after the goose. So the next couple of slides I'm just going to go on with is going to take us through just 2 slides about Scrum itself, and then I'm going to move on to our own project. So this is obviously another good reason for using Scrum, which is that it works and has been proven for tackling complex problems, especially where you don't know the detail of what you're going to need to have to do. and you can't really do a whole lot of planning up front. The solution then is something that should emerge at the end. And if you're trying something that doesn't work, it fails early on, so you can move on to something else. Works in increments, so we allow for early delivery of the most important features. So that's the idea of empiric process control. So your solution evolves as the knowledge is gained. The three pillars of Scrum there, transparency, inspection, and adaptation, are really important, and the Scrum framework uses those to underpin how it works. So that was about the this is about the how. That was about the why. This is more about the what and the how. So Scrum has three roles that are defined within the Scrum Guide: the product owner, the team, and the Scrum Master. So the product owner is actually the person who's responsible for the what. So they get inputs from the stakeholders, the executive team, customers, users, and so on. They're responsible for the product backlog. So this is the what is to be done. Very often that's quite crude, because it's not until it comes into the team that the team can break down the tasks that are involved in this and actually split them out and see what's going to be required in fulfilling those requirements. So this piece here is the center of Scrum, really, and it's called a sprint. It's where the team selects items out of here using the priority that the product owner has put on them. The team get together in a planning session and they decide what it is they're going to be able to complete within the period of the sprint. So the sprint can be between 1 and 4 weeks long, depending on how complicated the task is. And ideally, there would be a goal for this particular sprint, so that you can say that by the end of this sprint, we will have achieved whatever. The Scrum Master's role is just to make sure that the Scrum runs properly, sorry, just hang on. Yes, so the Scrum, the people in the Scrum are responsible for the how. So there isn't any, the owner doesn't have an impact on how the Scrum operates, except when it comes to, can I move this off here? Just down to the bottom for the minute. So at the end of this process, the product owner comes back in to examine the finished work, and it's either okay or there is something in it to be done again, and it moves back to the product backlog. So the sprint review then can involve, and it obviously involves the team and the product owner, but also the product owner may bring in stakeholders with them, depending on what part of the project is being worked on. It might be particularly of interest to a particular set of stakeholders. So within the Scrum, within the sprint, the team work as a collective. So there's no managers. There can be managers, but within the Scrum, it doesn't use any hierarchies. The sprint enforces a fixed time, and what's delivered at the end of it might vary somewhat. And the review keeps the team focused on the value to the customer. So as you can see here, the product owner role is an important one. It's not, I see John used a product owner in his presentation this morning. It's a specific role that the product owner in Scrum takes. which is specific to Scrum. And the product owner really, as I said at the beginning, is responsible for the what, and also to some degree for the value that comes out at the end. So we're a small organization, so we don't have as yet a project management office in place. It's underway along with a technical advice group and a change advisory board, which are being worked on at the moment. So the organization has an executive board and a steering group. For the project that I'm about to tell you about, we were entering into something new. We hadn't used Scrum before. We also were trying something that hadn't been done before and using new software. So we partnered up with Esri Ireland, which is not the ERSI, but the Environmental Science Research Institute, who would be like the Microsoft of geographic information systems. So the project team here was the Scrum team, with the Scrum Master being supplied by Esri Ireland, just to guide what was happening. Unfortunately, there wasn't a project owner identified as such, but the project manager on OSI's side was to sort of double up as the project owner, and that turned out to be a bit of a mistake, because there wasn't a full understanding, I think, of the role of product owner in Scrum. So anyway, we found this project that was perfect for Scrum, and it was all very uncertain at the beginning. The idea here was that the OSI project manager would shadow what the Esri product manager was doing. So it was really about learning how to do stuff and that kind of thing. So I'll move on now to the actual project. Some of you probably familiar with this, or at least have heard of Prime 2, which was a project that kicked off, quite a long time ago. So it was a modernization project where we were rebuilding the data model to enable us to deliver on our mission more effectively. This is largely all completed, with the exception of the project that we decided to take as a Scrum project. So what we have here is, we have along the bottom, we capture data using a number of different methods. We maintain it through our databases. And then what we have, what's still kind of being worked on, is the provision side of things. And in particular, this piece here, the cartographic orchestration. So this is to enable us to create the paper maps initially that we always created, but using a single source of data, and to do it in an automated way. So effectively, we had to create, from scaleless data, we had to create a set of products that could be at different scales. So this gave birth to the multi-resolution data store project, which was actually, looking back now, it was a huge aspiration. It was considered to be the holy grail of cartography at the time, and it had been talked about academically for decades. So this is something that has worldwide impact. We didn't know at the beginning whether it was fully achievable or not, so we set out to go as far along the road as we could. So the initial project was to build the capability within OSI to learn the technology, but also to prove the concept that automated maps could be created out from a single source of data from large scale to small scale. There was a strong business need for doing that. You can see this is where our Prime 2 data is here. And the idea was that this is where the data is captured into. Then we move it across on a regular basis to the supply side, which is here. And that goes out to produce large scale maps. And we had to build an automated process here to reduce the resolution in 3 levels to produce the largest of the small scale maps, and then the middle set, which would be from 1:25,000 to 1:100,000, and then the sort of the All Ireland type products. The idea was that we'd have a switch here somewhere that would say when this button is pressed, that that all of this happens automatically. So there was quite a lot of things that had to happen. With a strong business need for doing that. There's quite a bit of change has happened in the whole geospatial industry over the last while. So we needed to make these production of these types of maps, we needed to do it a lot more effectively and to take out the manual parts as best we could. So we reckoned, well, we'll have a go at it, nobody's going to die. The end user didn't know exactly what they wanted. There was a likelihood of priorities changing as we went along, and we needed the collaboration of cross-functional team members. So this was our perfect case for using Agile. So this is the sort of thing that that we've had to make decisions about. In the Agile setting, you have iterations over a short period of time, so we needed to get quick answers to questions like this. This is where you have a map at 1:1000. So you can see here there are things like street furniture, the street lighting there. You've got numbers on the buildings, names on the roads. So then on the next, this is at a smaller scale. So if the street lighting was left in, you wouldn't be able to see anything else basically. So it only holds on to whatever numbers it can show without obliterating stuff, and have the same thing then out at an even smaller scale. So there is less and less detail, but this doesn't happen automatically. We have to set it up to do that. Another example here, you can see at this scale, this buildings are clustered there. And we needed to, again, find a way to make that look better so that it suggests the idea of buildings rather than actually showing each individual one as is appropriate at that scale. So all sorts of decisions. Invariably as well, we would find that when we had sorted out this type of problem, it generated a problem somewhere else because we're working at a national scale, and it had to be a sort of one size suits all. And again, you see that sort of issue with the labeling is just overpowering, and you need to pull it back without losing too much of the detail. So this is how we ended up. So we were acknowledged as being the first national mapping agency to prove the capability of automating from 1:1000 to 1:1,000,000 from a single topographic database. So we were quite happy about that, but there was a lot of learning along the way. One was that it's actually quite difficult to sorry, just checking the time. It's actually quite difficult to to get it going at the beginning. We're a traditional organization, so although we've been involved in projects over time, and we've done quite a lot of project work. With Scrum, we found that it took a while for people to know what they were supposed to do. So these are things that we learned, that don't mess with the rules. The only rule that we did kind of mess with a little bit is that co-location is preferred for the team, but we were spread around 4 or 5 counties. But it didn't really cause us a problem. And anyway, when COVID hit, we were able to just carry on as before. The 3 main roles are very important, and it's important that the right people are put into those positions. Ideally, they should be filled by volunteers, because you want somebody who's going to buy into the project straight away. The best people are people who can deal with uncertainty well. They're agreeable, and according to studies that I've read, neurotic people should be removed. That one bad apple can kill the whole project. There needs to be, you need to get help at the beginning, somebody that knows a bit about Scrum and is able to spread that knowledge. Start small and then allow the people that have learned to seed it through the rest of the organization. The team become expert, so they should be consulted. Be prepared for difficulties at the interface with the traditional organization. This is where we found that we had difficulties getting feedback in a timely way. And it's the bit where I'm just thinking of John's project earlier on. The governance is really important. So this may seem to be sort of quite soft and not very tied to rules, and that's necessary, because you're dealing with design thinking to a large degree. Stakeholders need to be identified. Again, I saw this in John's presentation. They need to be identified. They need to be included in relevant Scrum reviews. They need to, if they are being brought into the Scrum review, they need to understand their role and that they have, they can affect the project outcome. That's why they're in the, why they're brought into the review. The product owner's role, again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is and how there needs to be governance outside of that. Governance and leadership is critical. Okay. So a thing, yes, that I forgot to mention there as well, collaborative software. Especially if you have got a distributed team, you need to have software that kind of is there and easy to use. We've used various things, Slack, Jira, Zoom. Very important to facilitate the team, because they need to be able to share their vision so that everybody knows what we're talking about. We use Zoom we have a 10 o'clock daily Scrum meeting, so we touch base with each other. The Scrum Master is meant to keep that within a time box of 15 minutes, but we found that over the course of when COVID kicked in, it was also essential for keeping that contact that people needed. So our Scrum is currently, sometimes we get it in the 15 minutes, but more than likely it's half an hour. So this is just a statement here that I got from a McKinsey article, and which I completely agree with, that truly agile organizations need to be both stable and dynamic. So the structures, the governance arrangements, the processes should be relatively unchanging set of core elements, so that there's a fixed backbone, and it's only from that sort of base camp, if you like, that the team is allowed to move to the top of the mountain. Yes, so without that sort of governance, there isn't any stability, and I think I'm racing to a conclusion. Questions? I'm putting up my email address there as well if anybody wants to ask questions that I haven't addressed today. And I think there's some questions already on that.
Yeah, that's great, Ita. Thank you very much. There are a couple of questions coming in on the actual Q&A section there, Ita, and I know both Eamon and John have been busy trying to address elements on the fly as well, which is great, guys. So I'm hoping that as people pose these questions, that they that they're either getting the answers now, or certainly we'll aspire to try and answer them into the future. And thanks, Cedar, for the provision of that email address in due course. So I know one of the questions here, Ita, from Tim was asking about the three main roles. He asks as to whether it's the project owner, the scrum master, and an another. So who was that another?
Oh yes, I lost the run of myself there for a bit, and yeah, another is the team, the members of the team, which is generally between 3 and 9 people, but we've found that smaller is better. 7 is about right, actually. So that's the 3 roles. There's the project owner, the scrum master who makes the scrum work, and the development team, or team as it's just referred to.
Yeah,
so that's
great.
The 3 roles. Yep.
Yeah, and I know Fiona is inquiring about the slides being available afterwards. So yes, the answer to that question is the slides will be available. So they're going to be posted up on the OPS project managers network pages. So Fiona, hopefully you'll get to see them there in due course. Questions for Ita: how do you cost and estimate projects?
We don't. That's part of the governance bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm assuming that's why I was delighted actually that John was doing his piece, because that all sits on top of it. And what we're doing is at the bottom. So it's his piece still is it still has validity.
Yeah, and another issue there in relation to your quotation. So that will be available in the slide deck in due course.
Yeah.
So I'm going to push it out to the panelists generally now in terms of whether the assistant secretary or the assistant chief of staff may have any kind of further questions in relation to, I guess, both Eamon's and Ita's presentation, given the fact that I paused earlier Q&A session and pushed it out towards the end of the session. So Adrian or Des, do you have any questions for our speakers this morning, or this afternoon even?
Just one, in fact, and it's something you could ask to everybody, but I suppose you could say a short few words in relation to the training that you needed to do in order to bring your own team or you know, the staff up to speed in order to facilitate that. And as I say, it's a question I could ask for any of the presentations of the presenters today. Thank you.
So I'll jump in, so if that's in order.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah, Adrian. Training obviously is critical. Like if you want to build up a team with a good degree of competency. In my own experience in social protection, I have a project office who mainly support the procurement process and support the governance, and they've extensively engaged in training on procurement, you know, whether it be EU guidelines and so on. And there's a number of vendors out there who provide that sort of training, and we've availed of that. So we tried to build up an expertise in procurement process within the unit to support the overall department. In terms of software development teams, again, we engage, like, we use the agile development within the department as well, invariably on most of, or if not all of our development teams. So basically we go through the full gamut of training to support agile development. You know, we have a large number of Scrum Masters who've trained up to a high level of proficiency. So other than like getting into the specific details of actual training, we would, with all new incumbents within the division, like say onto a development team or whatever, we'd work through a series of systematic training to bring them up to the level of expertise that would be standard for the team.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Kevin, yeah, I was wondering, I suppose, and again, maybe for all of the panelists, these were successful projects, and you can kind of see the fruits of those. Any unexpected challenges or surprises along the way? And I suppose maybe this is more for Eamon and Anisha, I suppose, because they're kind of specific cases that should be useful for colleagues to hear about in terms of a learning process.
Yeah. Go ahead, Eamon.
Sorry. Yeah, look, I suppose on our side, one of the challenges that has come as a result of our successful implementation, I suppose, has been our need to put in a prioritization process. So, you know, if you're able to turn around something quite quickly and that provides significant benefit and I suppose reduction in the need for staff to be involved at all aspects of providing customer service. A lot of the business areas were very keen for us to roll out future ones, and I suppose we had to develop a system quite quickly, I suppose, whereby we were able to prioritize, assess, I suppose, the viability of the technology and the solutions for each challenge. Sometimes we had people who had a technology and then looked for a solution for it or a project to utilize it, which is never really the right way to go about it. So part of it would be sort of tempering expectations around what is deliverable in a time frame. This was very much a pilot, and then you have to build around the governance and the structures and the processes in place to deal with it at an enterprise level. But very much, you know, making sure that the technology for us kind of comes second. The first one is, what's the challenge? What are you trying to accomplish? And then what's the most appropriate way to use it? Whatever technology you use it, be it robotics, be it AI in some form, be it traditional kind of practices or technologies that are out there. So it's not kind of just thinking this is the only solution to everything, I suppose, and kind of getting that message back to those who need it to understand it, and for us to develop our understanding of the capabilities itself. So that's sort of not so much within the project, it's kind of what follows, and make sure that you make it enterprise ready. It's very easy to get a single project up and running quickly. It's a lot harder to put in place what you need to do it for a large organization like ourselves.
I'd like to agree with that, actually, that was an issue that we had as well. The effects of what we had done on others, it was like other areas were not ready yet for what turned out to be a success. And also afterwards, we'll give that to the MRDS team, sort of became a kind of a cry because victims of our own success to some extent. I think this, for us, certainly the socio bit of the socio-technical project was probably the more difficult part. I see comments here actually regarding that. Mairead is asking the dual role of product owner and product manager. Yes, I think we should have had a standalone product owner role identified. And also with team members changing, yeah, we had issues with, well, we had issues with the project sponsor, I think, retired. There was a number of changes of personnel throughout the period that we were running the project. And within the team, it tended to work quite well. It was what happened outside of the team, as Eamon says, there was more people who didn't quite understand what was going on were somewhat less supportive than the original group had been. So that's.
Thank you, Ita. Okay, at this stage, I know I'm kind of eating into lunchtime now. So I'm going to pass over to Action 10 co-sponsor, Assistant Secretary Des Dowling, to just sum up sort of the session we had today. So Des, I'm going to pass it over to you, please.
Thanks very much, Kevin, and thanks, Colin, and everybody who's been involved in this network conference webinar. I think we've been very fortunate in the presentations we've got. Really exemplary, I think, in terms of their various insights. I think John, I suppose, showing us a very evolved approach to project management governance and how it fits within the overall system of management in an organization. And then both Eamon and Ita with some very kind of insights into exemplary projects. And I suppose what I liked about all of these is that, you know, these are all very practical and manifestly delivering real results, not just, of course, for the organizations concerned, but the clients and the citizen, if you like, which I think is where we always want to keep our attention and focus. So thanks, obviously, to John, Eamon, and Ita for giving us the benefit of the presentations and the insights that flow from it. I think we're always conscious at these conferences that there's a very, very wide church, I suppose, of participants here, from those who are really in the detail of individual projects to those, if you like, who are impacted by them, or those who are in various leadership roles in the wider organization. So we do want to ensure, if you like, that the network responds to that. I'd have to say I continue to be, and I know Adrian as well, to be very encouraged by everything we see and are involved with at these conferences. From a defence organisation perspective, we've been associated with this for some years now, initially under the leadership of former Secretary General Maurice Quinn and the present Chief of Staff Vice Admiral Mark Mellett, and more recently our present Sec-Gen, Jackie McCrum. And so we certainly intend to stick with it. We've used the project management approach ourselves for white paper implementation. And in fact, we've recently just completed a review of that. And if colleagues are interested in having a look at that, there's detail on the website in terms of an actual, again, implementation process. So we're all continuing to learn from this. The encouragement that I've described certainly reinforces, I think, the benefits, not just at the organizational level, but at the public service management level. So we're certainly keen to continue to ensure that as part of the next evolution of OPS 2020, that this initiative, if you like, remains an important strand of that, not just for itself, because all of us, if you like, participating today can see the benefits of what we're involved in, but also the extent to which actually an evolved approach to project and program management allows the system to implement other key initiatives. So if you like, you're getting a multiple benefit by, if you like, what we're promoting and trying to engender, embed here. So in conclusion, we continue in this virtual format for the moment, but in terms of the overall oversight and management of the network, we are open to your ideas in terms of the type of events you want to have. And there is a view, I think, coming through, a preference for a hybrid-based approach into the future. But we remain open to your ideas on that. We remain open. We're very keen to hear people's ideas in terms of other things that should be covered, and indeed people who either would wish to bring to attention or who you might learn from particular projects you've been involved with, or indeed speakers that you've heard at other events and you think it'd be of value to the work of the network. So please get in touch on any of those fronts. All that remains for me to do is to thank again my co-sponsor Adrian, and our participants for today, John and of course the backroom team, Kevin for his organisation for today's events, and his colleagues, but especially of course John, who is really the master behind all things here. John O'Donoghue and the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, without whom we would never progress past go. So I don't think anybody starting this morning realised they were going to get such a good workout in terms of sprinting and switching and all the rest of it. But I must say I've enjoyed it very much, and thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you all again at our next event. Thank you indeed. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.